All right, well then, guys, the goal of today's workshop is to go over a very simple marketing strategy blueprint. And from a high-level view, before we even really get into the slides, the goal is that we always start with strategy. It doesn't matter if it's internal or agency engagement or freelancer. If there's no strategy, there's just this constant anxiety that we're not working on the right thing, or that we are working on the right thing, but not in the right way, or that we actually will never find out because we didn't set up, baselines and measurements. Those kinds of things cause anxiety. And there's really no price tag you can put on the comfort, not to mention just the better ROI. The only thing that we run into again and again is with small to medium businesses that we work with. Sometimes they don't feel they have the time, the resources, or the experience to do it. So we both offer to work with folks on it, but we also like to provide education through the HubSpot User Group on how people can take a shot at it themselves. And that's always good for us too, because if we end up working together one day, we would like for you to have checked your strategy before. And finally, it's something you can do over and over. So it doesn't matter if you had a strategy for 2020 or 2021. This is where we're going to start looking into 2022. This is not the most comprehensive strategy ever, but it's a perfect fit for workshop sessions, which is how we do it. They're just a couple hours at a time, something you can bite off and do with a small team. And finally, it's the most minimum stuff you need to do, digital marketing that is inbound, and that's what HubSpot is. So we only work with folks who are using the HubSpot CRM, and it makes sense to go ahead and talk about how they're going to get their content out. So without further ado, Alan, I'll hand it off to you for our early slides.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks, Addison. I think you covered it very well. I did want to point out to you before we jump into this as well, we added some links at the top of the chat pane, and at the bottom link is the actual template itself. So those are the actual slides that we're going to be taking you through today. So if you want to download those, you can go to that landing page and download the actual PowerPoint template yourself. And again, it's designed, if you want to take it and do it yourself, you're welcome to do that. So we want to be trying to be very transparent with how we do everything here. Again, as Addison mentioned, we really focus mainly on mid-sized, private, startup, smaller, growing companies that are using HubSpot. And I'd say what we found before we jump into this is a lot of the clients, the reason we developed a lot of this is the clients that we were working with, they struggled with three things. One, it's usually a situation where they've hired a brand new agency or they've hired a new VP of marketing, and everything gets dumped on that agency or that new VP, and they say, all right, just go do it, right? You're the person now, go do it. And so then that person starts swimming a little bit, or that agency isn't fully aligned with the client or hasn't taken the time to understand the client's business as much. So that's one of the first scenarios that you have. The second scenario is someone kind of like Kristen, who just joined, where they've bought HubSpot for the first time and they're trying to onboard HubSpot. So this becomes a really, really good tool for people that are onboarding to HubSpot for the first time, so that they know where the pieces go inside the system and how it aligns across the entire customer life cycle. So hopefully, Kristen, it'll be helpful for you in getting started on onboarding. And then we also see a lot of clients that sort of have this founder hustle mentality, where the founder's just running around and it's just a bunch of fire drills, and every day is just another fire drill, like Addison was talking about. And how do you piece all that together? So that's some of the background on why we did this marketing blueprint. And so if you get into strategy, let's talk about that just briefly. If you talk about what is strategy, in my experience, in some ways, it's almost become a little bit more of a bad word. People, I think companies struggle with strategy sometimes. It's I think some agencies go out there and they sell this grandiose, strategy, engagement, and they spend, weeks and months just rebranding everything and doing things like that. We wanted something that's a little more practical, where you could hit the ground running and get all those pieces together, and then figure out which direction to go is going to give you the greatest return on investment. So that's a big part of it. And so what we found again is in strategy, a lot of the executives push back on it, and they say, look, I mean, we're successful executives. We know what we want to do. But what we found is the really, really successful executives, like this quote says, take the time to actually explain and push that strategy down to the individual people. And I would say, I would almost add to this quote, in addition to just clearly communicating it, actually implementing it into their system. And so once it's implemented in the system, it sort of becomes the code inside the system. So that's what we've been putting together, what we call more of a blueprint. It's a practical way for a startup to guide them toward the best execution of their go-to-market strategy. So I guess another way to put that is, you can almost provide the strategy yourself, and we just want to help you execute the strategy using this blueprint. So so how does this work? Addison, can you walk us through a little bit of how we end up setting clients up with and engaging with them to do this very quick, either one day or multiple virtual session strategy document?
Yeah. So like Alan said, it's meant to be really practical. So it has a strict timeline for how we sort of execute this and how you guys would execute this if you do it yourself. And the reason that matters is because it can't just stay in the arts and crafts or the idea phase forever. So there's going to be specific sessions focused on specific outcomes, and the magic is when those work together at the end. So there's a survey done at the beginning to gather the data, and we'll just look a little bit at what the questions are. If you're working only internally, you have all the answers amongst yourselves, but with a partner, we have to ask you. We get a little pre-call, and then the focus is on a persona. You already may know it, but we do need to restate what type of business and what type of person within the business we want to reach. A message map or sales story. What are we all saying? Because if we're talking to the right person, but we're saying different things to them, it's going to cause some dissonance. Content analysis. Where are you guys even saying these things at? I know content matters more to marketing than sales usually, right? Like even if they are using collateral. So that content analysis is definitely going to start us into the marketing and sales alignment conversation, which is perfect for pipelinement, which is how does your CRM handle juggling all of this through the client lifecycle? And you're going to see those steps today. Obviously, we're not going to go intensively into those because each of those half-day workshop is right 4 hour-long sessions. This is going to be the lightning version of that. You do get a blueprint out of it. We synthesize it if we work on it. You guys, if you're working along, would synthesize that yourself. And then you review it. Make everybody do a handshake at the end and say, do we agree that this is accurate and true and that we're going to work from this? That's an important stage. If you just throw this into a folder on your, on your drive, on your Google Drive and forget about it afterward, it's not going to do anything. So, all right, Alan, let's look at what we got next.
Okay, and so just a couple things on that too. I would just add, I mean, usually we can complete this in about a month. I mean, everybody's timeline can be different, so you can spread it out over weeks or even months. But these are sort of the components that we put together, and the order is helpful, and it's a team exercise, right? The whole idea is to get the both the marketing and the sales and a couple of the executives in the room and start hashing through some of these. So sometimes it's helpful to get a third party opinion on it, but regardless, just getting in the room to go through these steps is very, very helpful. So, but again, it's meant to be very easy to implement. So you can do it in a one-day on-site at your own company if you want to do that, or however you want to do it. So that part's flexible. So Addison talked a little bit about the different components of it, and I want to show you sort of the mapping behind how we try to implement a strategy. And so this is a description of how we like to execute on strategy. And really, if you think of the first 2 or 3 steps here being examine, discover, and then get to the blueprint stage. The third stage, that's where we're trying to get to, and those are the highlighted areas that we include in our blueprint. So those are the really the 4 or 5 deliverables that we give as part of our document, so that when we come out of that plan blueprint stage, we've got the key personas, we've got the message map that we've talked about, we've got the content SWOT or analysis assessment of the content, we understand what the pipeline looks like, and then we've started putting the data syncing between marketing and sales together. And so that really becomes that platform for you to accelerate your growth by executing. I'd also mention on this, a lot of times what we'll see is someone will start, if you think of, since a lot of companies we work with, they almost start at the next to last stage here, which is the ramp up stage. They're so eager. I mean, how many of us have worked with at a company or a client that's really trying to grow extremely fast? So they want to jump in and grow immediately. And so what you'll see, some of the categories under that ramp up pillar is where people just start running ad campaigns and they don't really have a targeted message. They don't really have a conversion path. They don't even really have a lot of content to go along with it. It's just come look at me or come look at my website. So if the messaging and the content and the data aren't synced up, a lot of times we'll get clients where they come to us and they say, well, our reporting isn't working. Well, that's because you haven't designed the data steps underneath all of this coordinated programs that you're running, so that we can measure them in the right way and segment them out and perhaps send the emails to the targeted people that we want to target. So this is what we do is, again, if you start on the left-hand side, is we come in and we do an examination, which I'm going to walk you through here in a second, which is mainly a survey. And then we have a preview call with the client and learn a little bit about what their target market is, what their basic story is, what their content is, how they try to use their creative content, document their process and their technology. So those 5 pillars under the examine phase, once you get those nailed down, then we can do the workshop itself, which is really the discover stage. And we start uncovering and have a give and take with the client and learn, again, what are their personas? What's their ideal customer profile? What's their funnel look like? What are they using for their technology and their tools? So we uncover a lot of that. And then that leads us again to the plan or blueprint, which is what we've got today. And if you can nail down those 5 key elements, then it just really sets the stage for you to start doing the day-to-day, which again are all your ad campaigns, setting up a content calendar, and actually go into market and executing on that. And that becomes a revolving door, so to speak, where you'll set up, you'll ramp up, and then you'll keep up, and then that'll become a continuously refresh your data, continuously refresh your content, and move along this process. So this is how we try to measure where we are and where you are, and it's a great benchmarking technique to help you understand where you are and where you're trying to get to. So that's the high level. If you saw those 5 pillars that we call them, you might recognize a little bit, because even we've been using them for a while, but HubSpot came out really at inbound and really emphasized, if any of y'all were inbound, they emphasized what they call their primary colors. So we call them pillars, but HubSpot started calling them primary colors. And you'll see as part of their platform, the design of their platform is based around these, ironically, 5 primary colors, which is your data, your content, your messaging, your automation, and your reporting. So I don't think it's ironic that we just happened to come across the exact same type of implementation process for the HubSpot platform that HubSpot inevitably is using and advocating for themselves. So just thought that was interesting that HubSpot's been talking about their primary colors as well. So that's why it works well with HubSpot. So if we jump in to the very beginning, what we'd like to do is do a quick assessment up front. This doesn't have to be complicated, y'all. We just use a Google form a lot of times. Sometimes the teams are very small, and we just send the survey to the 10 to 15 people that are on the team and get their feedback. And we just survey around those 5 pillars that we talked about. So those, if you want to call them primary colors or 5 pillars, whatever you want to call them, we do some survey questions around those. And then we also do some questions around understanding just from a high level who their primary competitors are, the tools that they're using today. Are they using multiple CRMs? Are they using multiple marketing platforms? Those types of things. And then as far as their business goals, we want to get into that and understand a little bit financially of where they're trying to get to. So obviously having the goals is very helpful to get all the team aligned on one page. So we do a survey on that, and this is what it ends up looking like a lot of times. So we'll get some feedback on what are their areas of interest or areas that they would like to improve. Inevitably, this comes back with, yeah, we need to do a better job in marketing. And then that can take a bunch of different forms. We're not doing real well on strategy is what we're talking about today. We're not doing real well and tactically on the day-to-day stuff, which is what we're also talking about some today, is laying the platform for that. We don't understand, or we're not using inbound marketing really, really well, or our branding is not great, or our sales process or conversion. So those are some common responses that we get. What I'd also like to point out is it's interesting to see where, and this is actually data from a real client, where the different personas inside that client were evaluating their own target market personas. And you could see there was a little bit of misalignment in some cases, right? So some were measuring them as high as 8 and some of them were 4. So you can see that there's an incongruence between the responses of the actual surveys based on whether they felt like they were aligned in their marketing, whether they were aligned in their target market personas, and whether their branding or message. And then if you look at the branding or message, I mean, the takeaway for us with this particular client is no one was super excited about it. Yeah, it's good. You know, we'll give it a 5. Don't love it, don't hate it. It works. So these can allow you to have a good open conversation about where everybody thinks you are. So that's some of the results that we get from that. The other part that we go into is the competition. So we like to pull out and do an evaluation, and Billy will jump in here in a minute and talk a little bit more about how he evaluates the competitors. But then we also want to get some of their business goals and data so that we know what we're driving toward. And again, in this particular instance, it was fascinating to see that in this case, you see a wide divergence between what their targets were. And this really came down to how they were defining what is, unsurprisingly, what's a good lead, and what's the difference between a lead and an opportunity inside their deal pipeline, right? And so how they were defining that was very different across the different team members. And so again, an opportunity for improvement there. So that's how we do some of the surveys up front to understand where we're at before we get into it. From there, we tend to jump straight into how do they look at and define their ideal customer, and who are they selling to and what do they need. And this is where Addison's especially talented at going in and doing a conversation with them around, who are some of their last or best customers, for example. So Addison, maybe you want to walk us through some of that?
Yeah, the blank template is that we're on right now is an easy, swift thing to go through because we can talk about why each of these things matter. We do want to talk about, when it says company, that means company name, but talking about type, size, and industry matters because if we don't identify that, we often find companies having a schism between, for example, if they have B2C and B2B purchases. It's good to actually state out loud what we want to pursue. And that's going to help, for example, if marketing is providing leads, but they're more B2C and sales can't close those as well, right? And they need B2B leads. That's the type of thing we should be talking about. And same thing for size and industry. There are many companies that offer products that service different industries. And a lot of times we take for granted the shotgun approach. This is pre-strategy. Folks will say, I want everyone that can buy this to buy this. Yeah, if you're actually target specifically, you're more likely to still land on the paper somewhere. Like throwing darts, if you're aiming for the bullseye, you're still likely to land on the board as opposed to, just throwing a handful of darts anywhere. You're not going to have any accuracy whatsoever. The title, persona, that's going to just really be what role in the company do you work with. Sources, you get them through referral, website. are most of your customers repeat customers? Problem is what problem that they had, and the reason they bought from you doesn't have to be just that you solved the problem, right? So their problem might have been, if we're talking about something agencies provide, they needed content strategy. Reason they bought from us might be they liked us, or we were geographically local, and that was a huge advantage. You know, they can be value props that no one else offers, or they can just be really, you know, matters of convenience. So I think we dropped one slide to talk about it filled in. We'll also be pretty brief on this, but as you can see, it doesn't take a ton of writing to fill this out. It's intuitive. You guys just literally pick your 3 favorite recent clients. You know, you don't want to go so far back that it's, you know, talking about a legacy client pre-internet or something like that. Focus on the ones you've gotten, and that way we're starting to flesh out, what do they have in common? What are the core attributes that we could market to get more folks like this? And it comes from a really good, sincere place. It doesn't feel like overanalyzing or using psyop on people. It really feels like, okay, how can we make marketing that reaches the kind of people that are going to have, they're going to enjoy our brand. They're going to enjoy working with us. I'm not going to dive into any of the specific data points on those. I think they're pretty intuitive. Alan, did you have any before we hit the next slide?
No, I think you nailed it, which is, you know, it doesn't have to be complicated. This can be a very short exercise where you just pull, you know, your best customers, and they're going to guide you toward what you're doing well, and then help you decide if the current state's where you want to stay, or do you want to move past that current state in some form or fashion. And I think from there, it drives that conversation that we've talked about many times, Addison. So once we've figured out from a company level what you're going after, we want to start looking at the actual people and the decision makers, and be able to have more personal marketing, right?
Yeah. So this is the unfilled persona, and you can see that we try to keep it simple. You can we've made very robust personas, but one thing is that it is a high skill thing to draft really advanced personas. These we feel are the things that people can most easily answer about them. We had fun doing this exercise for our own agencies. We did this exercise for Organic Endeavors to figure out who we're trying to reach. And as we started getting into the answers, right, so we settled on, hey, we want to reach these VP sales types, sales executives. And we started putting in the demographics, the psychographics, and the pain points. And as we were starting to actually say them out loud, we said, well, gee, that's not actually the people with whom we're currently interacting or that we most want to reach. So we actually, answering the persona question helped us make a strategic decision on the fly to reach this marketing persona instead. We were happier with the responses, but we also felt like these were the folks that we could better serve. We could do more for this marketing persona. And you'll see that while some of the spots said, for example, like pain point 1 and pain point 2, we said there were 4 that we could think of. You don't have to use the blocks, right? Like if you're using our template, you don't have to stop at this. But the nice thing is it does kind of force you to move on once you've put some of the answers in. And these should all be questions that you can answer. The reason that this training helps in telling you guys is if we just send a template out, you guys might miss the idea that like sources and channels are really going to be anything from like word of mouth and trade show to inbound blogs or paid advertising. So these things are not exclusive to your digital channels. If you're getting them from sources that are not connected to your digital ecosystem, how do you get those to connect to one another? How do you get people to be able to move in and out of that? And then the other thing that is big is the triggering event, because a lot of folks restate that one as basically their product or service. So we provide marketing services and we'll be like, what's their pain point? And the temptation is just to say they need marketing services. And oftentimes that's not actually where the search starts from. Alan mentioned earlier that a lot of folks seek out agency partners because they're new to the role and they need support. Or they actually heard about the solution first and want to know if this can solve other things that they are dealing with, right? So people come and ask us what HubSpot or Salesforce can do. Or they're already at the end of it and they realize I'm going to need some support and we can't, we just can't hire enough experts fast enough. So you see the triggering events are not just a restatement of, pain points. Alan, did you have anything else on our favorite little personas?
Yeah. So I mean, again, the takeaway for me on this is, and I've enjoyed working with Addison. He's just a master at putting together these types of personas. But what I come away from it with is it's not so much, what color they like, or, what type of liquor they enjoy using from time to time. This is, how they feel, the threats that they have on a daily basis, what they're scared of, what they actually have pain around, and developing that language, because this is going to be a very sales friendly persona, where you can literally take these different sections and use those for scripting in your outbound efforts as well. So this is a very outbound friendly persona, very sales friendly persona, that's less about, is what Addison talked about, the arts and crafts and what colors they like, but actually how they feel and how you can get to the root of their issue and their problem and have a valuable conversation with them about solving a very specific problem, which then drives a lot of your content down the road. So sometimes personas is a bad word, I think, again, but I think it's very, very helpful to go through this exercise as simple as a one pager like this, and develop, we just do one as part of our workshop. That's another thing. But, there's usually 3 or 4 involved. And I think the other thing Addison likes to do sometimes is a negative persona. That's another takeaway to help your database understand that these are people we don't want to do business with. So that's another helpful hint I've gotten from working with Addison on this. So those are the personas. And then again, we quickly like to move on. Again, these are designed to be in 2-hour blocks or sessions. And so really the second of 3 sessions starts with the unique benefit. And this is how getting into the messaging, again, as we talked, using the personas to inform that messaging. And we'll give the clients some homework, and we'll say, go home or in between sessions, just try and answer these 3 problems. And it ends up becoming an assessment. It's almost like another survey where you can see if the messaging is aligned across the organization or not. But we just simply say, what kind of problems do you feel like your company addresses, and for whom? So let's see who you think the target market is and what you think the problems are. And then ask them, why does that really matter? Again, pulling some of that data now that we've done a couple of key personas. Why does that matter to your persona? And then how do you do it differently? And as Addison likes to say, not just kind of company trivia, but how do you actually do this differently? What's your unique value positioning in with your competitors? So we can take all of this, and so we do this as a group. So this is especially good to bring the logical people, the sales ops, the marketing ops, the executives into the room, but then also bring some of your creatives, right? The marketing folks, and start talking about some of this as well. And so Addison, Billy, did y'all have any other thoughts about, how we try to move them into developing a sales story or a message map?
I was just going to mention that, everybody's probably by now familiar with Simon Sinek's approach of starting with why, but it's really just it's a great place to start, but you need to go deeper as you're talking about what's your customer's why. And that's what the buyer personas are all about. A lot of people kind of brush off buyer personas as sort of just, why are we doing this exercise? But there's really, if you take it seriously, your buyer persona is actually one of the most important things for you to get right and get some consensus on. Sales can actually contribute to that.
Exactly.
Because buyer personas are authentic, then they'll resonate that way with sales. So to shape your buyer personas is a great opportunity for marketing to work with sales.
Exactly.
And talk to customers. Actually,
Exactly.
reach out and survey your customers.
again, it's meant to be very helpful for the sales team. So what would that end up looking like? Again, we try to, we'll have 45 minutes of discussion around this, and then have the client do some homework, and then we'll try to merge all of the responses in and come to a consensus on what our problem statement is, why that's a problem, how they make their decisions, and then how they differentiate. And it's a lot harder than it looks to really get to 1 or 2 sentences for each of these. It involves some wordsmithing and such, but the idea is if you can put it into a story and make it more of a narrative and a conversational element, then it can become a core of your organization and a core of your alignment. And I'd say from, once we come up with that problem statement, the why and decision, then you can even take another step further. And this is what Billy and his team are excellent at, is taking that narrative, and then you can almost go another step down and pull out the 3 or 4 supporting elements for each of those power statements, as it were, those attributes of what your brand stands for. And then if everybody's aligned with what the main sales story is, and then the underlying support for each of those statements based on multiple personas, right? You can do this for multiple personas, and it ends up being a great conversation. But at the end of the day, you end up having excellent positioning statements, whether you're using them for your marketing campaigns, you're using them for outbound sales scripts or emails, you're using them for brand new employee onboarding, future website content. It exposes a lot of gaps there. So if you can hand this one pager to your team, then everybody's literally singing from the same hymn book, as they say. So any other thoughts on the sales story and message map, Billy, Addison?
Nope.
Okay. So from there, it's a natural iterative move to go to positioning. And this is where it's very, very helpful to look at your competitors. So again, what we do, you can just do a very high level assessment of who your 2 or 3 main competitors are. And this is just using ourselves, or in this case, myself, as a guinea pig. These are, 3 other agencies out there that focus in the RevOps space. So Allen, Helms, and Organic Endeavors sort of focus in the RevOps space. And so what Billy and Addison are able to do is drill in and go literally pull up these websites and do an assessment for some of our competitors, and see how we're positioned and compare with those 2 or 3 other websites. And this is especially helpful, I think, with the executives. Executives love to see where they stand amongst their competition, because they're highly competitive people. And if you can use that as your leverage to help have a conversation internally of where you stand from a branding standpoint, it takes off from there. So you can get some, this is a secret area to get some motivation. Addison, Billy, Billy, you want to walk us through a little bit of what you like to look at when you do an assessment of the individual websites?
Sure. And this is just a quick flashcard right here, kind of a summary, but it's a visual exercise to actually go through your competitors' websites from and put yourself, experience the website as if you were a first-time visitor with the needs of one of your ideal customers. How well do they answer your needs or appeal to your to your desires? How clarified are they? How clear are they with what's unique about their offerings? As Addison explained, the buyer personas help you with understanding your customers' needs. The messaging or the sales story help you clearly explain it. But this part right here, your blueprint won't be complete unless you actually understand what your competitors are saying, because they're not going to go away. A lot of people like to use warfare analogies and everything when it comes to marketing, but unless you're literally out to destroy your competitors, they're going to be part of the landscape going forward. So you're competing for a piece of the pie, for a bigger piece of the pie. So what your competitors are saying and how closely you've evaluated their websites and their messaging. It really just helps you establish or understand and appreciate the league that you're wanting to play in. You've got to measure up against what they're saying, and and as often as possible, either simplify and be clearer, find a unique advantage that you can play to your own advantage. And so the positioning in the marketplace is important, and that also comes with an honest SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis, we include that in the upfront survey before we do this exercise, and we get different perspectives from sales. May fill out this chart completely different than someone in marketing might. Top management might fill it out a completely different way. But to bring this to a consensus of what are the true strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, it's just so informative to fill out this, what you see here as a blank chart. No two are going to look the same from people you ask internally at a company, but if you can get a consensus on a combined SWOT analysis that looks accurate, then you've got that's a critical part of the blueprint, we believe.
Yep.
Yeah, these are some good examples, and again, these are just sort of extremely simple. And again, we used Alan as the guinea pig here.
Yep. So and this is, I think, one area where it may not be as valuable to do it yourself. I mean, it's not like it's not valuable to go through the SWOT analysis, but I think, and certainly if you break it amongst your team, so let marketing do a content SWOT, maybe sales do a content SWOT. But I think if you do have a marketing agency, or you've got a trusted advisor or someone on the board that can do an assessment of your content, it's also great to bring in some fresh ideas from the outside, and just a new and unique view of your own brand and your content. So that it's also helpful to, I'd recommend send this to someone outside the company as well to get some feedback there. So some of our clients enjoy having our feedback because Billy, again, is a master at going in and doing a quick assessment, because he's been doing this for so long, of the website and how it positions and what catches his eye. So he brings in some great insight when he does it in our workshops.
And that part's somewhat subjective, because it is evaluating from just using as much of an observational approach as possible. But there are other tools that you can use to do analysis on the competitors' positioning and rank for keywords and other things that we'll bring into the more evolved blueprint here. But we will use all this information to develop a keyword strategy, is one thing that this leads to. And keeping a baseline on your competition. Don't just observe their website in the moment and move on. Make note of it, because they're changing too. No one's just sitting still anymore. So your competitor may have a very outdated website that's very weak, and 3 months later, all of a sudden things have changed. They've hired some great agency, and they've hit the ground running with a whole new marketing campaign that's going to eat your lunch if you haven't kept an eye on them and you aren't measuring your results against theirs. HubSpot's got some great tools for that.
Yep. So great. So then once we've got an idea of what your SWOT looks like, we start to talk a little bit about your alignment with the sales team, or what we sometimes call as pipelinement. And this is how your marketing team can align their programs and content with the sales team. And this is probably not terribly new to too many folks. I mean, you've seen this. This has been part of the HubSpot messaging for quite some time, around how you target your audiences, convert them, and close them using HubSpot. And then how do you find inside your database or your CRM, how do you convert a stranger contact to an active contact, to actually entering the pipeline and being handed over, whether it's a marketing qualified lead or sales qualified lead, or if you just simplify it and call it a qualified lead, they become a dealer opportunity in your system, and then they become a customer. But this is where you're able to start tying some of the revenue and the full customer life cycle together inside the system, and it drives a lot of the reporting. And the reporting drives a lot of the math. And so what we found is you can see in these 3 blocks, there's a consistent 3 three-level conversion that most sales go through. You know, you can call it top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. That's how a lot of people break it out. If you're using your different CRM terminology, it might start out as a lead and become a contact, and then become an opportunity or something along those lines. But it's this is a we need to start. This is the way that all of your data is going to be measured, and where all of your reporting is going to come from. So what we do is, if you think of this as a funnel lying from left to right, we actually like to go in and start doing some math around this. And what we do is, if you flip that funnel around and start at the end of the funnel, which is what your targeted revenue is supposed to be for a certain year, what your financial metrics, KPIs, sales goals, sales quotas are. Let's have this conversation. It's not an easy conversation to have. I think a lot of people get intimidated sometimes by the math of it. It doesn't have to be crazy complicated, but I think it's good to put it on a sheet of paper and start having that conversation. And so what we find here is, if I'll just take you through a very simple example. If we get from the survey, again, this is something we would ask from a survey, and say, what was your annual sales target for this year? So let's say, what was your 2021 sales target? And if they said, $1 million, it's, again, we work sometimes with some smaller companies, but just to keep the numbers simple, if it was $1 million, then and you're winning a deal every month for a small startup, and you've got a very high deal value, average deal value of $83,000, you're obviously going to need 12 of those $83,000 deals, if you're signing on an average one a month, to get to your $1 million target. So you start working back from this math and say, well, of the deals that we win, how many came from the proposals that went out? And a lot of times, again, in your CRM, this might be stage, 5 or 6 of your deal pipeline when you actually issue a proposal. So how many move from stage 5 of your deal pipeline over to becoming a closed won deal? And so if your conversion rate here, there's several conversion rates that you'll want to be able to measure or have some insight into. And this would obviously be a 25% conversion rate. And as we continue to work backwards, so of the proposals that we deliver, if we usually convert 25% of those proposals from the number of ops that were created in the pipeline every year. So if we created, 16, or I guess in this case, a month, if we created 16 opportunities that month, we only did proposals for 4 of them, you've got a 25% conversion rate, obviously. And so you continue to work backwards to your qualified lead. And this sort of is that divider. You see here, the light blue is sort of your sale. This is typically your sales pipeline, right? So this is where your deals or your opportunities live if you're using something like Salesforce. And then on the blue side, the dark blue side, these are the actual leads or contacts, the individual people that you're trying to appeal to and create awareness and convert from a marketing standpoint. So this is a huge conversion point between what's considered a qualified lead by marketing or business development that's handed over to sales as a new deal. And so again, if you're just for round numbers, if we're looking at a 25% conversion rate, you'd need 64 qualified leads that month to reach your sales target. And moving back from there, that means if we've still got another conversion rate here of 25%, of the new leads in our system would have to be 256 leads. So you're starting to get into some high volumes that need to happen so that you're going to make your sales targets and your revenue targets for the year. And then, of course, you get to how many web visits are required. Not everybody that visits your website, of course, is going to convert or fill out a form or, attend your event. So they won't necessarily become a new lead. So those are usually lower conversion rates, and that's okay. It just helps give you an idea of how much you need to invest to fill up your entire funnel and pipeline to reach your goals. And this is a conversation that, the CFO is certainly comfortable and excited to have, that your executives are interested in having. And if you can start talking about what we need to reach each of these milestones along the sales journey, it's very powerful. And then I think from there, you can start talking about the difference between the top rows here and then the bottom rows, which would be if in 2022 we want to more than double our annual sales target. If we want to double our sales, how are we going to double our sales? You can see the leverage that's in the system. Just in this one example, if we increase the conversion just at these 3 steps by simply 5% and moved up from converting with not any change at all in the number of web visits you have. There's no change at all in the number of people that come to your website, just by simply changing these 3 conversion steps from by 5% each at 15 to 30 to 30%, you could actually reach your sales target. So you start to see the leverage that's built into your funnel and your pipeline, that marketing, these are the areas, the dark blue is where marketing has an impact, right? And that's where marketing can have an oversized impact from an ROI standpoint on how the company is performing. So we like to go through this. Yep.
I was going to say, this is also the slide that gets you the marketing and sales budget, because you can show, hey, we believe that if we dedicate these additional resources, say you're trying to upgrade HubSpot and add, more marketing, you want to go from the starter to marketing pro, or you want to add sales seats. If you can show that you're going to be able to make a 5% impact at those 3 points and more than double the revenue as an outcome, I think your decision makers are more likely to join you. So this is where the strategy actually starts to reach outside the department. It says, guys, look, if you need the justification for how we plan to do this, it's in the rest of the document, but the math is your moneymaker slide.
Yep. And I think the other conversation that we find that this drives is, it's not just web visits, right? It's you're going to need to do a very similar exercise around, if you're spending a lot of money on conferences and trade shows, you can run them through the same math. And so you start to get what it drives is a conversation around what your channels are and what your primary channels are and what they should be, and how much you can invest in each of those channels. So you might spend a lot in conferences and trade shows. You might spend a lot in paid advertising. You might spend a lot, or may not be spending any on content to drive actual web visits. So this can be separated and segmented based on what primary channels you're going after. If you have a very large direct sales team, they may have their own networking exercises that they go through. They may have their own list of contacts that they brought with them into the company. So those are some areas where you can track that with some very simple things like lead source, so that you can measure some of this. So this is very powerful, as Addison mentioned. And so from here, what we like to do is, if I can find my slide here,
and I was going to say, we're running short on time, so we'll take 2 more minutes for the last couple slides. Tell them how they can get the template and everything like that.
Exactly. So with this, really, again, we're just talking about, we take that math and those 3 conversion points, and this becomes the mapping of everything we did at the front of the workshop with the personas and the messaging, and we apply that through these three portions of the funnel: 1, 2, and 3, the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, and the bottom of the funnel. And those live in different places in your system based on where they are as a stage or conversion. They may be a deal, it may be a contact or a lead, as we said. And what we want to do is find that next yes to move them to the next stage. And that would look like, in our case, we went ahead and filled it out, but what you want to do is fill out the unique approach and the conversion yes, so that you understand, again, what those scripts or conversations that need to be happening at each of those conversion points that drive your pipeline math. And so from there, we're going to wrap up, but this is where it leads us. So this is a diagram that we often use. We don't do this as part of the workshop, but this is sort of where I usually come into play with some clients, is to understand, how do we map that using the life cycle deal stage. If, for example, if you take a simple sales process, 8-step sales process on the left-hand side, what does that look like inside of HubSpot, and where do you measure it? And so we like to use custom lead and contact statuses there in the middle, because a lot of times you're doing both inbound on the far right and outbound on the far right. We've got to map all that inside the system. So that's usually where I come in after the workshop, if someone wants to engage us to go into a deep dive into their CRM and their reporting and see how that would work. And so we would do that. And then you're at the last stage of the agenda, and we would finalize the blueprint within a couple of weeks and send that to the client, and that wraps it up. So these are some ways to find us. There's a link to the primary colors. And again, if y'all want to download the strategy or blueprint template itself, that's in the top of the chat pane. You can go straight to that landing page or copy that URL into your browser and move forward with that. Any questions? Did we get any questions that we want to try and tackle at the end, Addison?
I didn't see anything come up in the Q&A, which was surprising. I think people are dropping because they've got prior engagements for the top of the hour, but we will send a follow-up email from this that provides the links for you to be able to follow up on your blueprint and download it so you can take next steps with what you learned here today. We'll also be adding the video, I believe, to that page.
Yep.
All right. If anybody has any thoughts or questions, go ahead and let us know in the Q&A and we'll address them. We can hang out for another minute, but if not, we really appreciate you guys coming out.